want to approach this is just, first of all, give you a basic overview of what we've been experiencing throughout this pandemic as it relates to mental health overall and substance use disorder. So many of you have probably heard on the news or have read that clearly anxiety and depression have increased up to 50 to 55% during the pandemic. There's been a lot of families that have been impacted through the trauma of the pandemic by having loved ones, friends, neighbors who have contracted COVID and resulted either in severe illness or in sometimes loss of life, which is, the ultimate loss, the ultimate tragedy, if you will. Also, the shelter-in-place mandate that we had been under for a period of time really kind of forced us to sort of isolate, where we weren't able to connect with our families. I think about skilled nursing facilities, assisted living facilities, nursing homes. Those individuals weren't able to see their families regularly. So it was very, very challenging for them, as well as for the family members not being able to visit their loved ones. And just when you think about just being able to invite or have family over for that connection, there has been that interruption as well throughout all of this. And so with substance use disorder and mental health concerns, one of the main driving forces behind it is often isolation. People feel isolated, they feel alone, they don't feel connected to others. And so really, when you think about what's happened during this pandemic, it really has been the perfect storm, and really sort of a breeding ground for increases in addiction and mental health issues as a result of just the isolation piece alone. And then the title of this PowerPoint or this presentation, when we talk about times of uncertainty, not really knowing what the ultimate outcome of this pandemic will be or would be. When we think about last March, April, and May, there was a lot of uncertainty. And now there's much more hope with vaccinations on the increase, and the research showing that vaccines do in fact work, and so that's hopeful. And overall, we are in the midst here in Michigan of our third surge, but we are seeing a decline in daily cases, and hospitalizations are slightly decreasing. So every day, so that's a good trend. But nonetheless, we've, I think here in Michigan, been feeling it more in the last 2 months because of this third surge that we've had. So in saying all this, as I said, we've seen an increase in substance use disorder and mental health conditions. And, prior to COVID, it was already a stigma around. There was a stigma in place for mental health conditions. People often feeling ashamed or embarrassed if they were struggling with mental health issues or substance use issues. And so subsequently, often the stigma is a barrier to people getting treatment. And so I wanted to talk a little bit first about that stigma piece, because that's so very, very important. And I really want you, one of the big takeaways from today's talk is that understand beyond a shadow of a doubt that you are special and unique, and that if you are struggling with any kind of depression or anxiety and or alcohol or drug addiction of any kind, know that that doesn't make you somebody who is morally defective, weak, bad. It really is a condition with addiction, we say it's a disease of the brain, and it is something that it's a chronic condition that can be treated. And with depression and anxiety, combination of therapy and medication, if that's what's prescribed as part of your treatment plan, the data supports that 82% effective rate in helping people deal with depression and feel better within 6 to 8 weeks of getting treatment. So that's pretty incredible when you think about it. So there is no stigma. There's nothing to be ashamed of if you're struggling, or if you know of a family member or a friend who is struggling. And one of the things that I always encourage people to do, if you know of someone that is struggling, to maybe just try to talk to them and say, hey, there is help. There's nothing wrong with getting help. Getting help is actually something that requires courage. And in fact, it's a very positive move in the right direction, in that any kind of condition related to mental health or addiction is treatable. And so it's those who suffer in silence and never get treatment. That is that's the real sad part of all of this, And when thinking about addiction specifically, all those who struggle with addiction, only 5% ever get treatment. And a big driving force behind that is the stigma piece that I just mentioned. In mental health, I don't know the exact rate, but I do know it's around 22% of all people who struggle with depression and anxiety ever get treatment. So that's a lot of people that never get treatment. And so I just want to know that it is out there. And if anything, if you could talk openly about it and share openly with somebody whom you trust, even sharing the narrative a bit is in and of itself better than suffering in silence. So I grew up in an alcoholic family, and my dad died when I was 17 years old. And I grew up in a very chaotic environment. And so as a result of that, very early on in my life, I learned to perceive the world as being unsafe. And I never knew within my own family of origin, my environment growing up, from one day to the next, what to expect, because there wasn't any consistency. It was a lot of chaos. So as a result of that, myself, I developed severe anxieties that were made worse and triggered by, various situational stressors in my life through the years, to the point where I suffered major panic disorder. And I myself had to get counseling and get treated. And, as a result of that, I've been able to recover and do quite well. And one of the things that has been incredibly helpful for me is mindfulness, which I'll be talking a little bit about today. Every time I'm able to share my own personal narrative, that facilitates healing. And we know that the brain has the incredible capacity to heal itself. And both with mental health and addiction, with the appropriate treatment, that if you were able to shift the thought process and work through that, and learn to also recognize and identify thoughts and befriend your thoughts, and not fight your thoughts, but learn to recognize them and befriend them, if you will, then that in of itself can serve to help really facilitate healing. But the other piece is that when you're able to share and be open and connect with others about what's been painful for you, what's been difficult for you, challenging, instead of going, and isolating and being able to process with somebody else, that can actually, have an impact on the brain. The brain. We know that, just sharing the narrative. I'm not suggesting it's the cure-all, but the alternative of remaining in silence and isolation is not the way to go with this. Okay. So moving on. So I like this quote by Albert Einstein. And, basically the quote involves really an individual that experiences him or herself as somebody separate from others is really a delusion of our own consequences. And we must be able to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circles of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty. So really what Einstein was getting to is this idea of being open to others and understanding others have similar experiences, similar feelings, and that, often, shame, for example, shame is when you feel inherently defective, that there's something wrong with you. And often what makes shame worse is when you internalize negative emotions about yourself as a result of your family of origin, maybe what you grew up in, where there were indirect or direct messages that you are not worthy, you are not good. And when you grow up in a very unstable environment, we now know that self-esteem, unfortunately, gets negatively impacted in terms of how you are experiencing yourself. And so it's having that recognition and knowing that, it's okay to connect with yourself in a different way and connect with others in a different way, and understand that you don't have to be perfect to be okay, and that, you are okay just as you are. So that can take some work with somebody or, a professional counselor, but it really does require for you to just be able to talk openly about some of your narrative and also about your feelings, which brings me to my next slide. So Claudia Black is somebody who I always admired over the years as I've studied. She is actually one of the pioneers in addiction treatment. And she and Virginia Satir, another woman who I greatly admire, were very much on the forefront of treatment for families, specifically during a time when the field was very dominated by males. So they came into the scene back in the late 70s, early 80s, and did some absolutely beautiful things as it relates to treatment and addiction treatment. And so this is a quote that I love that Claudia, it's in one of her books, and I'm not recalling which one, but she talks about it's okay to talk, trust, and feel. To free yourself from your past, you must break the rules of silence and compliance. So, even in the moment, you can do this quietly with yourself. When I was second year at University of Detroit Mercy, no, my third year, I'm sorry, my junior year at U of D, I took my first class in addiction, and I was exposed to this particular quote. And it really resonated with me because I grew up in a family where I didn't feel it was okay to talk about what I had witnessed in my own family. I didn't feel it was okay to feel. We didn't talk about feelings in my family. Not only as it relates to the alcoholism, often what we saw wasn't validated, it was covered up. And my mom was a beautiful woman, and she did a lot to take care of us. And we eventually moved out of that environment when I was 11 years old, but we really never talked about it. And as a result of the chaos that I shared with you, I wasn't able to really learn how to trust either. So once I was able to, understand that these are normal, it's normal within a family where there's total chaos or there's addiction or there's some type of trauma, that these rules of not being okay to talk, trust, and feel, that you can break those rules by just saying it to yourself and then allowing for yourself to open up a bit and learn how to trust. That, again, not only resonated with me, but it helped free me a bit. And so that was the beginning for me of my recovery process, going back to when I was 22, 23 years old. So I want to talk a little bit about the importance of self-acceptance and unconditional love. It is very, very important that you hold yourself up with a high unconditional positive self-regard, and that you practice self-compassion and self-love every day. And, I think for a lot of people, this is a struggle. And so, I really want to encourage all of you to embrace unconditional self-love. And then in doing so, you're better able to connect with others and also provide love and kindness to others. But you have to be kind to yourself first. Okay, it's not impossible to do daily acts of kindness, even if you're struggling with kindness towards self. I'm not suggesting that, but for it to have the power of healing and healing of self, it's very, very important to understand the unconditional positive self-regard and self-love. So love 1 minute at a time, 1 hour at a time, 1 day at a time. Know that you're special and unique in your own way, and know how special you are and connected to the universe, that we're all connected and we all have more similarities than we do dissimilarities, and so much is focused in today's media on our differences, and we do have differences. We have cultural differences, but my goodness, in all of the differences, we are so much, very, very much the same. So, and then one other point that I want to stress is letting go of perfectionism, that it's very important to understand that you don't have to be perfect to be okay, that nobody is perfect, and that everybody makes mistakes, and that part of the human condition is understanding that we're all infallible. We all make mistakes, and making mistakes, that's how we learn, and that's how we're able to grow. I like this quote, and I chose Eckhart Tolle, who came out with The Power of Now about 10 years ago now. And he really, as an author, really, he brought to the populace and made the idea of the power of now in mindfulness really on the forefront to others, whereas prior to his work, not as much was known in the general population about mindfulness and the power of now, and understanding that all we have in the moment is now. And that's really, truly what mindfulness teaches is learning daily presence, learning all you have is now. And understanding that in our thoughts, often we are thinking ahead, or we're thinking about what just happened. So even now in the moment, some of you may be thinking about what you're going to be doing in the next half hour, what you have going on later in the day, what the plan is for tomorrow, or you may be thinking about what just happened to this present, prior to this presentation. And so when you're able to catch your thoughts either ahead, or you're thinking about the recent past or the past, you're able to pause in the moment, re-centered, and connect to the now. So that is mindfulness. That is a mindful moment. So one of the things I wanted to address too is understanding joy and happiness, the differences. So one of the things within the West that is a struggle is that often there is a connection to materialism for happiness. And so understanding that joy can come from daily mindfulness and learning how to just basically let go and be able to flow with whatever emotions you're having, whatever thoughts you're having. And as a result, that will really bring about a joy and a peace on a daily level. And so that requires you to go inward and not focus on outward so much, what's happening outside of us. You think about today, the media, which really thrives on chaos and getting our attention, through the negative events that happen and how we tend to glean to that. We tend to, get juiced by it a bit. And one of the reasons why we do is because so many of us are living on automatic pilot, that we're just kind of going through our life, day to day, automatic pilot, really not being truly connected inwardly. And as a result, we're not able to experience the beauty around us, and that we just kind of have blinders on and going through life in a very robotic fashion. So the way to acquire joy ultimately is through an inward connection, an awareness, a calmness, embracing the calmness, the stillness, and then as a result of that, just being able to pause and be silent and embrace stillness, that ultimately can bring about a feeling of peace and joy. So understanding these three basic emotions, anger, anxiety, and fear, that these are barriers to joy. And the first thing that we have to be able to do is understand when we're experiencing this. Obviously we've been living in a climate with the pandemic where anxiety and fear has been very much prominent. And what we've been hearing through our politicians and through the news media outlets, and even with what we've been experiencing more closely in our own lives, there's been some normalization of that fear and anxiety, understanding that what causes fear essentially is when we feel that our lives are in danger. I mean, that's when we go into a fight or flight mode, is that the perception that our brain is having and how we're perceiving things is that our life is in danger. And so when you think about what's occurring, that's been a very real thing. But at the same time, it's been made worse and exacerbated, honestly, and not to get on a soapbox, but I think all the media has made it worse. And, I'll say fear mongering, if you will, but, they're in the game for ratings. So they want to suck us in. And so you have to be very, very careful. And, one of the basic strategies is, kind of turn the media down a little bit. You want to stay informed, but at the same time, you also want to be able to filter and disconnect from some of the drama associated with it, because it will heighten fear. If you're constantly listening to all the negative, the reality is in this very moment, we are all safe and we're okay. We're here connected together, and it's okay. And so just something to be cognizant and aware of. One other thing with panic too, and I don't know if anybody in this audience has ever had a panic attack. I've had many of them. But what happens with a panic attack is when you suddenly have an overwhelming feeling that you're either going to die or go crazy, essentially. And so the body basically is in overdrive. It's in warning. And so you might have a flood of adrenaline where your heart's racing, you are not breathing properly, so you'll feel lightheaded. You'll feel disconnected or a surrealism, and you're really not sure what's happening. You'll be engulfed with fear, and you might be shaky. Your legs might be wobbly. You might not be, So it's a very terrifying experience. And so you're in that moment. You're in fight or flight. You either want to fight or you want to flee. And so, but there's no real external stimuli necessarily. There's nothing that's triggered. It's just come out of the blue. So that can happen to those who struggle with panic. Again, when you go back to your family history, or if you've had even recent trauma, that, you can incur panic. like I just discussed, that can come out of the blue because you'll repress, or you'll keep it down. And then all of a sudden your body catches up and your body alerts you and you go into overdrive, hyper alert mode, and that results in panic. The good news is you won't die from a panic attack, and it will always pass. And if you can learn to recognize the precursors or the triggers before anxiety or panic, that is one of the most basic things that we teach, because if you can interrupt that cycle earlier on before you go into full flight or fight, then you can stop it before it even starts. So hopefully this is making sense. So I talk a little bit about ego and understanding what it craves for the moment. I talked about the chaos piece of everything. I'm going to move on quickly, but just understand that, again, as I said earlier, the ego itself craves the chaos and trauma and, or drama, drama, approval, envy, the need to be superior to others, and sort of a must-win attitude. Those sometimes, those types of feelings will really trigger unhappiness in the final, just understanding how that triggers unhappiness, sadness, and anxiety. So just as understanding just when your ego is in control, complaining, apathy, overreacting, the need to win an argument, talking about others in a passive aggressive way to feel better about yourself, exploitation of others, exploiting others. Already mentioned this a few times, but the unconscious need to create drama to feel alive, being judgmental. And, going back to the mindfulness strategy and the tenets of mindfulness daily, learning to practice being non-judgmental, not only with others, but with yourself and with your feelings and emotions, not to judge. Like Lisa had said earlier, she's tried mindfulness in the past, but she's failed at it. So, really the approach is to be non-judgmental and open-minded. Approach everything with curiosity, openness, acceptance, and love. COAL, curiosity, openness, acceptance, and love. Be open to it. And so even as you enter into a mindful moment, you don't want to judge it and you don't want to have any major expectation of it. You want to just learn to embrace being and being present in that moment, whatever that moment is. And at any given moment, we all can have different emotions bubble up. And so it's not to try to push those emotions out. It's just learning to be with those emotions, embrace them, and understanding that they will pass, whatever the emotions are. And so that's what creates the equanimity. That's what creates the calmness. That's what creates ultimate peace, is learning to accept your emotions, your feelings, whatever they are, and accept your experiences, and doing it in a non-judgmental way. This is overcoming the ego, talking about staying present through awareness, daily awareness, minute by minute awareness, mindfulness. We talked about this earlier, but just understanding that preoccupation with past or future. When you start going into either one of those through your thoughts, it's just pausing and recentering. Once you can recognize when you're either future oriented or past oriented in your thought, you just had a mindful moment. You just had a mindful moment. That in of itself, you've entered into the world of mindfulness. Becoming the observer within yourself, learning how to observe your feelings and not do anything with them. Observe your thoughts, your emotions, not doing anything with them, just observe. Random acts of kindness, empathy, focusing on gratitude. That's very consistent with mindfulness, and doing a gratitude list daily. Coming up with one thing you're grateful for can help. Sometimes people are struggling with severe depression, though. They can't think of something they're grateful for, and that's part of the disease of a depression. So understand that. So again, if you're experiencing depression where you have a constant feeling of hopelessness, sadness, might be resulting in daily crying. Your sleep is interrupted, whether you're sleeping too much or you're sleeping not enough, or you can't sleep. You have racing thoughts. You've lost interest in previous activities that brought about joy or that you had fun with, or if you've had thoughts about wanting to harm yourself. These are symptoms of depression, and that requires professional intervention. So I cannot stress enough, there is help for you if you struggle with depression. And you can and will get better with appropriate intervention. And there's nothing wrong with you reaching out for help. It's such a courageous thing to do. It's such a courageous thing to do. And it's the greatest act of self-care and self-compassion one can engage in, quite frankly, is getting help when they need help. No shame in getting help, ever, ever, ever. Learning to let go in humility and being less focused on materialism. These are other ways to overcome the ego. So these are the attitudinal foundation of mindfulness. We talked about the non-judging piece, learning to be patient, approaching things with a beginner's mind, learning to trust, non-striving. And so it's being able to kind of just go with the flow. And, we all want nice things in life, and within our own places of employment, you may have goals set up in your department or goals in your life, and goals are great. But part of what mindfulness in general teaches is learning how to just be able to enter into a flow state, which will help you, quote unquote, achieve your goals, as opposed to always just being centrally focused on trying and getting the goal, and then losing the forest and the trees, if you will. So you're just tunnel vision and you're missing everything else. So it's learning to be able to experience other things and not just be striving with tunnel vision, because you'll lose so much part of your life as a result of that. So the higher power of being awakened, this gets a bit into spirituality and understanding that, there's something greater than ourselves out there. But, the higher power of being awakened also really speaks to learning how to connect with yourself and go inward, and learning how to center yourself while not numbing and escaping your feelings with alcohol or a negative relationship or isolation. These are the kinds of things that can really hinder you from being able to experience joy and peace in your life. Okay, so it's really just being able to sit and pause and be still in the moment. Okay, I'm going to move on. We've talked a little bit about this. One of the things that I want to do in the moment is if we can engage in a very brief exercise. And this is a very simple thing to do. What I want you to do for a moment, if you can just put your feet soundly on the ground, firmly on the ground for a moment, and put your hands in a comfortable position. You can fold them or put them up on a table, whatever feels comfortable to you. Okay. And then either fixate on a particular object in front of you for a moment, or if you'd like, you can close your eyes, whatever most comfortable for you. And then the next thing I'd like you to do is just take one breath inward through your nose and then exhale through your mouth. You can take another breath inward through your nose and then exhale through your mouth. And let's do that one more time. Inward and then outward through your mouth. So all I want you to do now is notice any thoughts that you're having. Just observe any thoughts that you're having. Just observe. Don't try to make any thoughts happen. Just observe any thoughts that you may be having. And do nothing with the thoughts. Just let them pass, because they will pass. Just notice them. Just observe your thoughts. And if you're not having any thoughts, that's okay. Just embrace being still in the moment and pausing. We're not doing anything with the breath right now. We're just letting the breath do itself. Just letting yourself breathe naturally and observing your thoughts. You are so special and beautiful in every way. Know that. Just observe your thoughts. Notice them. You're doing great. Now, if you can just pay attention to your body for a moment and notice where you might be feeling any kind of tension in your body, starting with the cervical area, the neck area, and just allow yourself to focus on that area for a moment and release. Let your shoulders just drop down and release. Notice the bicep area, let it release, your forearms. And now if you could bring your attention to your hands for a moment. Just focus on your hands for a moment. You may notice a tingling sensation. You're alive in this moment. Notice that tingling sensation. If you don't feel anything, that's fine. But just focus on your hands for a moment, the tips of your fingers. You're doing great. Now I'd like you to take a moment to just center on the breath. Do nothing with the breath and let the breath do itself. Notice the air coming in and the air going out. And as you notice your breathing, you can even mentally or silently say in, out, in, out. And if you're having thoughts, that's perfectly normal. Just let those thoughts pass and gently go back to the breath. In, out. In, out. Okay, if you can come out, bring your awareness back. I want to thank you for those of you who participated in that. I felt some energy, which is a good thing. I can't thank you enough for participating in that exercise. And that is a mindful meditation. And I have some examples of it in the slides. This is the mind-body connection, which we just did, connecting to the body. And this is going inward, which we've talked about. I'm going to move on to that. But here is the breath meditation. And you'll have these slides. I'll make sure that these get to Lisa so that you can all have them. And then this is just learning to practice silence. You know, one of the things that I really enjoy, going back to this slide for a minute, understanding your 5 senses. Whenever I ask medical students to identify their 5 senses, often they fail. They don't get this. Scent, touch, seeing, hearing, taste, okay? Anytime you can connect and anchor on any of these senses here, that is another practice of mindfulness. So one of the things that I like to do in the morning is I like to do a listening meditation where I will go outside and I will just anchor on the sounds outside. And, you know, anytime that you can connect to nature is a very, very good mental health strategy. It's a very good coping strategy. And putting in place or implementing some type of listening meditation where you can just focus on the scent or your sense of hearing is a very, very powerful meditation. And I enjoy it. I enjoy it. And then I will go into a visual meditation where I just anchor on what's around me and I watch and observe animals, birds, squirrels. I'll study a squirrel for a few minutes, study a bird as if I'm experiencing it for the first time. That's the beginner's mind concept. You know, finding sort of the awe that you had as a child, you know, the wonder that you had as a child, experiencing things with a beginner's mind. And, you know, we lose that as we get older because it's really more of a survival mechanism where the brain learns to label things quickly and you move on. When you're a kid, when you're a child growing up, your brain's developing. So, you know, you're experiencing things more as a first time or in that moment where, you know, you have that sense of awe. You can connect to that again intentionally by practicing, observing and studying the details of nature and allowing yourself to do that. You know, just studying a tree and noticing the intricacies of a tree, the differences of a tree, the shape of the leaves, the length of the branches. These are all simple mindful things that you can do that can really help to enhance your overall daily coping and your overall life. So anyway, I wanted to leave it open for a few more minutes of questions if you have any or comments. I am so happy to be able to have shared this time with you. So questions, thoughts, comments?